Hi everyone! This week we're looking at chapters 3 and 9, writing technical and coherent documents. We're moving from the global, such as audience and format, down to the nitty-gritty, to the sentence level, where we're looking at bullet points, lists, and parallelism. These two chapters are very important because they cover the first two things someone notices when they receive a technical document: what it looks like and how it's written. There are two things that you will hear me say over and over again in this course. The first is, technical writing is rewriting. No one is a master at writing. Nobody says something perfect for the first time in the written world. As students and professionals, we often think that writing is easy or that you are a good writer, and so that draft that you finish at 2 a.m. is perfect and ready to be sent in. However, your boss, your instructors, and your clients can always notice. We always go back to rewrite, and in all honesty, research and rewriting makes up 80 to 90% of the writing process. Making sure it's concise and you're using the correct word choice, making sure it's error-free and that everything is spelt right, the punctuation is right and in the right spots, that you've gone back looking for concision, that you've gone back writing for the reader, are all important things that take time and an eye for detail. The other thing that you will hear me say over and over again is that technical writing orients the reader. After we do that first draft, basically the brain dump, getting all that information that's in our head onto the paper, we then start crafting and recrafting our paper, making sure that it's oriented to the reader's needs. We do this, as Markle states, by knowing our audience, knowing our purpose, knowing the available modes of communication, knowing our budget and time frame, and knowing really what our reader needs in order to do whatever it is that they came to this document needing. Templates are not bad to use. They're a great beginning point, but they should never be the end point. You always want to make them yours by switching colors, moving blocks or images around, and making them work for you. Here's an example of a template that I found on iWorks, which is the pages on a Mac computer, and I turned this into a course syllabus for last year. And you can look and see some of the small things that I did to make it for me. And it's gone from a more whimsical document on the left to something that's a little more clear, a little more academic, yet still gets a personality across as something that's a little less structured than you might find in a technical writing course. So I made it work for me. And this is something that you'll want to start doing as we're working with templates throughout the course. So Markle talks a lot about titles, and within this idea of titles, we talk about the hierarchy of titles, subtitles, headings, and subheadings. I want you to grab your book and look at page 200. You'll notice that on page 200, towards the bottom of the page, under Writing Coherent Titles, he has a title that ends in ing, offering free cholesterol. Under this, you'll notice that the title ends in ing because this helps create a less wordy, clearer title. You can ask yourself, well, what is this document about? And the answer is that it's about offering free screenings. What type of free screenings? Cholesterol screenings. And bam, you now have your title. Now, titles are the overarching, right? So the title of a book, the title of a chapter. We move from there down into headings. And headings organize your document and provide, as your text says, a hierarchy of information over on page 201. You need to make sure that you understand the different levels of headings in order for you to create the hierarchy of the importance of your work. So a first level category is a category, and the subsequent levels are subcategories. And each particular level must be an equal footing. That is, each item in that level must be the same type of thing. So let's look at this example. You'll notice here that the level 1 is part 1, shows on network television. Level 2 headings are the different networks, so ABC, CBC, and NBC, or CBS, pardon me, and then NBC. Then we look at the third level, and the third levels are the genres. We have dramas and comedies. And we move here to the fourth level, which are actually the titles of the shows. And they're all the same, going through each network, okay? We can also see this in our book. When we look at page 207, if you just flip a few pages down, you'll notice the section called Structuring Paragraphs Clearly, which further develops on page 206 the Writing Coherent Paragraphs heading. So the topic's important enough to be categorized and broke it down. On page 211, there's another subheading called Using Coherent Devices Within and Between Paragraphs, which is then a level 2 heading. Finally, we have a level 3 heading in here on page 207, which is called Topic Sentences, which breaks down structuring paragraphs clearly. And so you'll see how there are these different levels that are further developing this one thought. Did you also notice how they're all written in the same way? They have a similar appearance and same text placement. When you do levels of headings, yours should too. So notice that level heading 1 on page 206, Writing Coherent Documents, is all in capital letters. It's in blue font, appears to be bolded with an orange line underneath it. The second heading on page 207, the second level, Structuring Paragraphs Clearly, each word begins with a capital letter, so it has capital and lowercase. It's on its own line, and it is in a bold font. Now look at the third level heading, the Topic Sentences. It's in italics, smaller font. The first letter of each word is capital, and it does not appear on a line on its own. And you can see this reflected throughout the chapter on how these headings work. For example, if you go to page 211, you can also see the second and third level headings again. Now, one thing is, in between these headings and these sections, you should still have clear transitions from one paragraph to the next. And on page 211, Merkle offers a list of transition words and phrases to help move from one thought to the next. It's a good idea to go ahead and bookmark this page. So bullet points and lists need to be parallel. This is a key area that is often riddled with mistakes. Parallelism is actually very difficult. There are several ways to make lists parallel. You can make lists parallel with consistent punctuation. You'll notice on this slide that each of the bullet points ends in a period. So this goes to the second point, which is that sometimes each bullet point will be a fragment, and sometimes each will be a full sentence. Regardless of if it's a full sentence or a fragment, if one ends in a period or a semicolon, they should all end in a period and a semicolon. It's being consistent. Another way is to also see how each of the bullet points, the blue image to the left of the list, they are all consistent. They can be numbers, they can be bullets, they could be dashes, but they should all be the same. You also want to make sure grammatically that it's parallel by looking at the tense of the word. Here we have set, break, present, structure, and punctuate. You could also have mixing, baking, cutting, and gluing. You also want to look at word choice. So you'll want to look at, when you go to a concert, you may not bring a gun, a knife, a beach ball, or a cooler. They all have the article A in front of each word for consistency. These are small things that actually are quite difficult. We can look at this example here of the correct and incorrect example under grammatic parallelism. Here, the first example, they all raise, acquire, and schedule. The second one, the incorrect example, it's because they raise, acquire, and paid. So you have to think about how to turn that third bullet point to make it parallel to the previous two. You can also look at structural parallelism. A similar structure means that the items are not only parallel, but they're also written with some of the same words. While the writing style might seem repetitious, it helps the reader understand your ideas, reinforces what you're talking about, and lets the reader know how they all relate to each other. There are some pitfalls to avoid when you're writing. Some things are repeating words, even transitions. For example, if you're a person that likes to use however a lot, you might want to go back and refer to page 211 and see what other words you can use besides however. You especially want to look for this if you repeat it multiple times through a document or multiple times in one paragraph. You want to Avoid overusing general pronouns, such as these, that, those, this, them, things along those lines that de-emphasizes the subject. You want to make sure that you're always stating the subject when it's important to put the emphasis back on what you're talking about. It's okay to have a sequence of events. However, you want to start writing professionally and eloquently. So you want to stop some of these abrupt transitions. First this happened, then this happened, next that happened, and then finally this happened. There are other ways to actually transition from one to the other, and you want to start exploring some of those options. Of course, another thing you hear me say all the time is write with your audience in mind. Make sure that you're writing for them, getting across exactly what they need. We're going to do an activity this week on passive versus active voice, so this is something that you're going to start being able to recognize in your own work. And of course, adding filler, right? Readers are raters for information and they want need to know information. You want to be able to leave as little room for interpretation as possible. And Merkle does a good job of providing some examples of making your sentences clear and leaving little room for interpretation on page 212.